Over the last few years, we've heard some criticism that Nikon has neglected APS-C, or DX as Nikon refers to crop sensor cameras, and I think there's some validity to that complaint. With the release on October 15th of 2 new DX lenses for Z-mount, is this announcement enough to answer that criticism? In this video, I'll offer my viewpoint as it relates to my use case. Hi, Ray here. Not with the new lenses for APS-C, the 35mm f1.7 DX MC, a macro or micro lens, and 16-50 f2.8 VR, but I'm here with some commentary based on conversations with people who have tried them out, and as I said, how these developments might relate to my use case, and here a small collection of Z-mount glass from third parties, not to forget the Nikon DX camera that my wife and I own, and I include myself because although I bought this Z50II for her, I often steal it to have fun with and to test APS-C size lenses that I review here. Other stuff too, highlighted in my last video. Okay, so let's briefly mention the APS-C cameras Nikon has produced since the Z system debuted in 2018. The original Z50, of course, and I almost bought that. Story here, the Z30, first of the vlogging style cameras, ZFC, the first retro style camera, and the second iteration of the Z50, the Z52, all 20.9 megapixel cameras. As far as lenses, the addition of these two brings the number of DX lenses to 8. That's not a huge selection, but if we look at the coverage, it's pretty decent. And I'll get to third-party options later, after a brief look at the important specs of these new additions from Nikon. First, the 16-50 2.8 is the professional version, I'd say, I think it's fair to call it that, of the hit lens that I have here on the Z52, which has a variable aperture from 3.5 to 6.3 and has its drawbacks, especially for video. In short, I generally don't like variable aperture lenses, though they often have, admittedly, the advantage of being more affordable and lighter than continuous aperture, like this new f2.8, which is priced here in Canada at $949. The hit lens sells for just $399, and I must say, really, it's a bargain. I'll just clear up why I don't particularly like variable aperture lenses. As you zoom, the aperture and so the exposure changes. Now maybe that's okay if you're using an auto setting of some kind, auto ISO or program, but I rarely use those settings, and almost never for video. So that means that I have to account for the change manually, and I can't take advantage of the zoom during video recording. That's my use case. But as far as optical quality, no complaints at that price point, and from what I see and hear, this 2.8 version, though it doesn't get the S-line designation, it does exhibit the kind of optical excellence that we've come to value over the last, 7 years, since the Z-mount revolution began. And incidentally, we've seen that in lenses like the little 40mm f2, it's not an S-line lens, but an amazing achievement at an amazing price. But back to DX. The 35mm f1.7 looks great as well. Not VR, but this is a macro lens with life-size magnification and close focusing distance of 0.16 meters, 0.53 feet. Now, I don't intend to repeat here what's already been examined in detail in hands-on reviews. so I'll include relevant specs in sidebars. My impression is that these are very capable lenses, and they're priced reasonably given the build and optical quality, excellent control of flare and chromatic aberration. No, these don't have the kind of coatings found on the best S-line lenses, but again, it still looks like they're more than capable of professional level results for photos or video. Of course, with that 1.5 DX crop, we have in the 16-32.8 the near equivalent of a 24-72.8 with just a bit of saving. And in the 35mm 1.7 MC, a 50mm 1.7 macro lens, somewhat akin to, well, really it doesn't have an exact peer in full frame since the 50mm MC is a 2.8 lens. I don't mention this as a real negative, for macro use at least. I also noticed that the 16-32.8 is listed as one of the 4 available macro lenses on the Nikon site, due no doubt to its close focus distance that varies between 0.15 meters, 0.5 feet, at 16mm, to 0.25 meters, 0.82 feet, at 50mm. That's impressive. I have accumulated, mostly through review units, a collection of APS-C lenses, 6 in all. This 35mm 1.4 from TTArtisan, a 50mm 0.95 at, that's from TTArtisan as well, and these are both manual focus lenses with no electronic communication with the camera. This little TTArtisan 56mm 1.8 autofocus lens, an autofocus 35mm 1.7 from Viltrox, those should be that way, and still its closest focus distance is 0.5 meters, and this AF 23mm equivalent to 35mm full frame, of course, 1.2 from Sirui. I should note here that this was one of a trio of sniper lenses that included 33mm and 56mm 1.2. And let's say they didn't attract a lot of praise. Now, I didn't receive the full set for review, but I'll say that I like this 23. It produces some nice images, still and moving. And the aforementioned 16-50 Nikon kit lens, I like all these lenses. They range from what I'd call character lenses, like the TTArtisan 0.95, definitely a specialty lens, to lenses I have no problem popping on the Z50II for professional work. I find use for them all. And there's no reason that you can't use them on full-frame cameras, though you might want to switch to DX mode, unless you're okay with some pretty intrusive vignetting. Works for some creative applications, I guess. And I should say a little bit more about the Z52. I have no reservation really calling it a pro camera. Yes, it's just 20 megapixels, but within that parameter, it is capable of producing excellent images, both stills and video. The 4K 10-bit H.265, we even get the option to record in RAW. It's certainly more quality than can be appreciated after YouTube compression. I've described the compromises with the kit lens, so the option to replace it with this new 2.8, that's very tempting. It would absolutely result in better images, more subject isolation, better bokeh, better low light performance, resulting potentially in less noise. I would think it has a lot going for it. Personally, I don't do enough APS-C macro to rationalize the 35 1.7 MC. I own the full-frame 105mm 2.8 MC. This new APS-C does have a lot more going for it though. Beyond macro, I fancy it might even be a good portrait lens. But that's my short take on these new DX lenses from Nikon and APS-C in general. Did I mention how compact and lightweight APS-C is? Yeah, one of the best arguments in favor of the format. And these two new lenses definitely fit the bill when it comes to weight savings. But I hope that proved worthwhile watching. If you're still watching, please give it a thumbs up. And as I record this, we're less than 40 subscribers away from making this a 10,000 subscriber channel. Now I hesitate to pull it on too thick, but if you're not subscribed yet, please do consider joining us. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss more content from me. In the meantime, take care, cheers. We'll see you later.